Welcome everybody to this session. It's a pleasure to have you with us here today. My name is Karen Hallows and I'm an international coordinator at an organization called Peaceboat. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this session. Capacity building for intergenerational leadership and youth empowerment on climate and ocean. And we're delighted to have with us a great youth panel and we hope to have a lively discussion. And this side event is organized by 5 different organizations who are all working on youth empowerment and capacity building in different ways. Before we start, I'll just say a quick word about each of the organizations. So Peaceboat that I work for, we organize educational global voyages on board a large passenger ship which sails with the logo of the UN Sustainable Development Goals on the side of the ship. We hold various capacity training programs on board the ship. We start the Ocean and Climate Youth Ambassador Program, which specifically focuses on young leaders from small island developing states or large ocean states who are on the front line of the climate emergency. And we also have the Youth for SDGs program, which we'll hear a little bit more about later. So that's about Peaceboat. We also have the Climate Youth Negotiators program, which is run by the Youth Negotiators Academy, and that trains and connects and empowers youth negotiators to participate meaningfully in the UNFCCC processes, in the negotiations. Participants are nominated by their country's government, and an individual is guaranteed to be a member of their delegation in the UNFCCC negotiations. And I understand, if I'm not wrong, that there are 120 delegates. Is that correct, Marie-Claire? 125 delegates here in Dubai who are taking part in the Climate Youth Negotiators program. So that's CYNP. And we also have Commonwealth Sustainable Energy Transition Youth Action Group, CSET Youth, is a youth-led action group aiming to accelerate the sustainable energy transition. It aims to empower youth. And young professionals of the Commonwealth to support, contribute to, and advocate for sustainable energy transition in the Commonwealth, and to achieve SDG 7, which is energy for all. Our 4th organization is Global Kids, who are working with high school students from underserved communities in the United States. And they educate, inspire, and activate youth to succeed in school, achieve post-secondary success, and take action on critical issues facing their community and the world. And last but certainly not least, we have Global Youth Development Institutes, GYDI, who are dedicated to educating, engaging, and empowering young people around the world as leaders in addressing humanity's collective global challenges. And we have representatives from all those organizations here today, so please reach out to those and find out more about the organizations, and we'll give a shout out at the end about how you can get involved in these organizations that are involved in putting this side event together today. And as well as these 5 organizations, we're delighted to have this side event to have the support of the Indian Ocean Commission and the government of the Seychelles. And we have Representative Jeanette here from the Ministry of Education of the Seychelles. So before we go to our panel, very briefly, I'd like to do a little icebreaker. And if you could just turn to somebody that's close to you and introduce yourself and say what your interest is in this topic. It could be intergenerational dialogue, capacity building. Just introduce yourself very briefly. I'll give you just 2 minutes to do that. Okay.
Seychelles, we have global
Okay, just 10 seconds to wrap up. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have you all introduced yourselves? And at the end of this session, if you can continue your conversations outside and exchange your business cards and network. So we'll go back to the panel here. I'd like to introduce the people who are on the stage. From Global Kids, we have Fatima Zara, who's a dynamic advocate for global change, and she's representing Global Kids. We also have Tandy Kirk, who's a student ambassador from Washington, D.C., and a dedicated climate activist. And joining them today, we have Jeanette LaRue, Director General for Education at the Seychelles Ministry of Agriculture, Climate Change, and Environment. And we're going to be asking a few questions. But I'll be handing over now to moderate this panel to my colleague here, Michaela Chan of CSET Youth, who's also co-organizing this event. So Michaela, if you want to take it away.
Yep, thank you very much. So I'm Michaela from CSET Youth. I'm based in the UK and I'm a civil engineer. So I'm really happy to have 3 such wonderful advocates for youth inclusion next to me. So I guess I just want to start with a quick question of what motivates you personally to engage as a youth or with youth in the climate and ocean space?
Well, what motivates me personally is just like seeing climate change happen really before my eyes. Like I hear about it in the news. I've seen it like in South Africa with their water crisis, and Flint with their water crisis. So I'm just I'm made aware of it, and I see like that there's something that we have to do about it because it's right in front of me.
For me personally, it's just seeing these animals like Arctic foxes and polar bears like losing their natural habitats and like them becoming extinct slowly like in front of my eyes. Like that really pains me, and just knowing that like whatever happening, it's real. Like it's not like far away. Like it's happening right now, and we need to like take action for it.
For me, I've been working over about 30 years with children and youth in environment education. I've got some of my youth here with me. In fact, Seychelles has 10 youths representing here. And I feel that there's a need to prepare them for what's going on in the world. Someone has to do it. And we invest a lot of effort and money, financial as well as effort, to ensure that we prepare our children for tomorrow. But we also prepare youth leaders. We have a lot of youth leaders, and we have a lot of youth NGOs in Seychelles.
Great, thank you. So Tandy and Fatima, do you guys want to share a bit about your work with Global Kids?
Yeah, so a significant thing like that I've done with Global Kids was this summer or last summer. I did an action project where I went to City Council and presented a petition that we had gotten. We had 100 people sign it. We had called like earlier multiple times, no answer. And so we went to City Council. We talked to representatives because now the council members were like wanting to talk to us. And then we left, nothing really happened. But I feel like just being there, trying so hard and like not getting a result motivated me more to continue my work. And because I know eventually I will get a result, and if I keep like doing it, they will listen.
This summer I worked at the CFR Institute with Global Kids. It was a month-long internship, and after the internship, everyone created an action project. My action project was based on refugees, and I feel like that connects to climate change because I know so many refugees, they have to migrate and leave their homes to another country because of flooding and droughts and food scarcity, and they have to leave their homes. And I come from a country where there's like a huge population of refugees, so like I see them and like I know that it's real. So I did an action project where I made a presentation and presented it to my school and posted it online, advocating for climate change and like making people aware of the refugee crisis.
Great, thanks both of you. It sounds like you're doing really good work in both the climate space and how it bridges with other issues as well. And it's really showing like the change that youth can make when you're really passionate about something. So I know in the Seychelles you recognize that passion from youth. So I wonder if you could share some very concrete examples of how the Seychelles is supporting youth.
In Seychelles, we start very small from kindergarten because we have the Eco School program, which is compulsory in all schools. We have an environment educator in all focal point in all our schools. It's like I said, we have to assess them at the end of the year. Every year they are assessed on their environment education performance, all schools in the country, for them to get the award. So we follow the students. And on my side at the Ministry of Environment, when I notice those promising ones, which can be our leaders, during the school holidays, we bring them together. So we build them the capacity, we help them to be able to help others, to educate the other youths. And we have a few of them here, like I've said, but we have quite some leaders, CEOs now who are in environment, who has gone through the program. And we also have a few who has taken up now, when they finish the school, they have their own environment NGOs who are well recognized and doing a lot, because as Seychelles is surrounded by the ocean, like you saw the picture that was in Seychelles, the children in the ocean. And ocean is very much linked to climate change in the Seychelles as a small island state, because we keep seeing changes all the time. So they need to understand what to do, but it's more to do with adaptation. So they need to teach the others and help them to adapt. Priority right now for Seychelles is adaptation.
Great, thank you. So I guess one of the key themes of this event as well is about the intergenerational aspect and youth working with non-youth. So I wonder if you could all just talk about how you've seen the benefits of that coming out in your work, and like the pros and how we can foster that in more projects. If we start with Fatima.
So the way I see it, I think it should be like letting teenagers or younger youth have a seat in the table, and just like hearing what they have to say, because they're the ones that have to like live through this crisis. They have like so much energy and so much more ideas, and like they know like more, they have more ideas and they have like more methods, and they're like the future generation. I feel like they could come up with like a better solution, or like do things that the other generation hasn't done. Because previously, from like my personal experience, I've noticed that the older generation, they're unaware, or they're like somewhat in denial of the fact that climate change is real. They think that it's there, it's like far away, but teenagers and older youth, they know, they can see the statistics, and they see whatever is happening in the world, and they could like educate people and like actually step up for it. So I feel like they should have a seat in the table and be heard and listened to.
Do you want to go next?
I would say that in Seychelles, children and youth has a powerful voice at home. They bring a lot of messages what learn at home, because our old parents, they didn't experience those changes happening now. So we see a lot of, our youth get the chance, especially NGOs, to have projects where they involve different levels of people, but we're also training a lot of our youths. For example, at the negotiation table inside there, we have a youth who is learning how to negotiate. So it's important for at all times to give the youth exposure and get them to get involved and understand. And for sure nowadays we have more, like in the past, during my time when we did not have climate finance, for example. Now our youth, we are not sending university 30 plus to the university to study that. We are sending young people to learn, to understand that, so that they can take over. So yes, they do get there's a lot of changes, and it's the youth who are, children and youth who are helping the older citizens to understand, and we're expecting them to take over, so we're hoping for the better.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, to build off what they said, like speaking between generations. When generations talk together and able to talk through the issues, even the ones that are in denial, and talk through like what they, oh my gosh, what they think, and you know their different opinions on what is happening, they're able to come together and create a consensus, and that consensus can lead to more progress rather than one group talking together or you know leaving another group out. So when we come together and create our own one idea or group of ideas, we can move forward more easily.
Great. I think those are some really good messages. So I think there's a bit of time for Q&A later in the, yeah, okay. So just before we finish with this mini panel, what is one message that each of you wants the audience to take away from your involvement in the event today?
For all those leaders here, I mean adults, never leave the youth out of your program. Ensure they are always there, and please do share your knowledge with them. They will be doing us a lot of good in the future. We need them.
I would like to say like this is the time to like actually step up and do something, because if we leave it for later, it's just gonna keep getting worse, and eventually we won't have another option. So like now is the time to take action.
And I would also say like communicate, talk to each other, make a plan, and act. Do what you need to do so the world can be better.
Can everyone give them a round of applause? I think they did really well.
Okay, thank you very much. It was great insights from our panel. We have global kids here who are working with high school students. I mean, I can't imagine participating in a COP as a high school student. That's fantastic. And we work with global kids for many years when the ship visits New York, and we've had youth from global kids on board, and we're happy to continue that collaboration. At Seychelles, I've always been impressed by the work that you've been doing to inclusivity of youth in every aspect. And we've had representatives from the Seychelles on board the ship several times as part of our Ocean and Climate Youth Ambassador Program, and we'd really like to continue to work together in the future. So thank you very much. A round of applause to our first panelists, and I can welcome the second group. Thank you. Can I welcome up now onto the stage our second group, Giovanni, Elizabeth, Anusha. Okay. Do you want to be instead? Yeah. So now we're moving on to our second youth panel. We wanted to give an opportunity to hear many different perspectives, which is why we've broken it up into two panels. And also youth is something that we discussed when we were putting this together. Youth is a very, very broad, we talk about youth, but I mean that's covering all ages from high school up until 35, I think is the UN limit. I mean that's a very wide age range, not to mention experiences and perspectives. So we're now moving on to the second panel. I'd like to introduce, starting just at the end, Giovanni. Hi, nice to see you again, Giovanni. Giovanni Henry is from the St. Lucia. He's the first Caribbean representative to the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on climate change, currently at the Alliance of Small Island States, and we were happy to have Giovanni on board Peaceboat as a Climate Youth Ambassador in 2019. Next, hi, Anusha, you're representing GYDI from Mauritius, and it's a really pleasure to have you here with us today. Marie-Claire from CYMP, who's one of the co-founders of the Climate Youth Negotiators program, and very active in the climate movement for a long time, and now bringing up the next generation of youth for training. And Michaela Chan, who's a UK-based civil engineer specializing in water resilience, and she's here representing CSET Youth. So thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to start by hearing a little bit from you about some of the successful capacity building programs that you've been a part of. That's one of the topics we're looking at today, and there's so many different programs out there. And I think there should be also a lot more, and people are looking how to get involved in those. If you can sort of share some of your experience of what you've been involved with. Should we start, Giovanni, would you like to start maybe some
Thanks. Yeah, I
From the
think
end.
as the sole male on this panel, can start first. But definitely, again, it's always good to be, with Peace Boat and others here today. I think if I were to talk about capacity building initiative, I think one of the primary ones is the reason why I'm here actually, is part of the Alliance of Small Island States Fellowship, which essentially is a climate diplomacy training program for young people from small island developing states that helps build the capacity in terms of understanding climate negotiations and the sort of the wider UN process. So it's sort of a year-long fellowship. In fact, we just had our graduation 2 days ago. Sorry, I've lost track of the days here at COP. But and it gives you where you actually support your country directly. You're part of the delegation and you can contribute meaningfully, sort of both in the short term and the long term. And that is, in fact, we actually have now a call for the next quad for next year on now. So if you're from a small island developing state, definitely have a look at this. But I think I would be remiss of me not to mention the successful capacity building initiative is actually the Peace Boat Ocean and Climate Youth Ambassadors Program. I think I've said this before when I took part in is it 2019? Yeah, COVID has sort of messed up the time frame, but it was 2019. And it was actually one of the sort of eye-openers for me, coming from a small and developing state and making that linkage between oceans and climate, because sometimes it's seen as too, we don't see the interlinkages as much as it should. And there's a way, in a sense, whereby working on climate, working on oceans, how you can have that sort of dual effect. And I think definitely it was one of my sort of eye-opening in terms of understanding from a wider perspective the climate and ocean issues and how you can simultaneously work on the two for the benefit of it. So I just wanted to just sort of highlight these two. And I think one of the key elements within that is how it's also context-specific driven as well, whereby, there's no one solution fits all. What I may apply in terms of in St. Lucia may not work in Seychelles or in Fiji or so on. But through that sort of South-South cooperation, which these programs provide, you have an opportunity to exchange with others and actually build on your ideas and sort of scale up your initiative. So I think it's a key element in sort of having that South-South cooperation is key, particularly from a youth capacity building landscape.
Thank you, Javonik. It was a pleasure to have you on board. And one of the things we wanted to have with the Ocean Climate Youth and Ambassador Program was to make sure that we had youth from the different oceans, from the Pacific, from the Caribbean, and the Indian Ocean, so that they could share perspectives and see similarities and also differences to be able to build networks across different oceans, across large ocean states. Anusha, you're here from GYDI, and I'm sure that you've experienced a lot of capacity building through them, but can you talk a little bit about your own experience with successful capacity building programs?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here, and thank you for this opportunity to speak a little bit about our impact as youth climate leaders. So my own capacity building started like 12 years ago when I was at the University of Mauritius, where we were trained on being climate leaders in our country. Following that, I joined the UNESCO 9th Youth Forum in Paris in 2015, pre-COP21, where it was focused on developing the literacy and future knowledge of youth on climate change. And in terms of small island developing states, I have been able to work with many islands of my region, Réunion, Madagascar, and Seychelles, and also Comoros, just after the Conference of Youth in 2015 again. And further than that, I work closely with Seychelles in the Seeing Blue program, which was a capacity building focused on ocean. And we had sessions which were practical and theoretical, so we learned about all the theories about ocean, but we also went into diving experiences and snorkeling around mangroves to understand how the roots of mangroves help us in reducing erosion and also protect our marine biodiversity. That was really a fantastic idea and a fantastic project, because you can just see with your eyes what happens, and it just made us all inspired to go and protect our marine biodiversity and our coastal region. One of the very important capacity building was also through the Young African Leaders Initiatives, the YALI and the Mandela Washington Fellowship, where we came underrepresented from small island developing states in Africa, because the program was much more focused on the African continent, but us, we were brought there to bring that voice of youth from underrepresented regions like SIDS in Africa, and we were able to tell about our climate action, and we received leadership capacity building to go and foster those actions even with greater impact in our countries. And also, I have been blessed to receive training in the Climate Leaders Program. It was a training of the trainer. So receiving that training, I was able to train more than 200 youth of my country in climate actions. So yes, and I think the biggest takeaway from that is you just plant a seed, what you learn, you can give that to others. And as seeds in the Indian Ocean, we must always work together and protecting our marine resources, our natural resources, because we depend on them, and ocean is our identity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Exactly, the ocean is the identity, and that's why I was referring to large ocean states, not small island developing states, exactly. So you're talking about training and capacity. Marie-Claire, you're co-founder of the Youth Negotiators CYNP, Climate Youth Negotiators Program. I was astounded, 120 delegates here. So can you tell us a little bit more about the capacity, your own, what you've been successful capacity building programs that you've been involved with as an individual and are now running as well?
Absolutely. Maybe just to mention that I'm filling in for our Tonga negotiator, Elizabeth, who is currently in the OSIS huddles and negotiations to finalize some text on the GGA and other related matters. So that's why she cannot be here. That's why I jumped in, just for the clarification. But yeah, as you correctly mentioned, actually I've been a negotiator for the government of Switzerland at the age of 22, and I had a lack of understanding and of knowledge on the procedures and processes, and that's why for me it was very clear that if we bring young people here, if we want to equip young people in the negotiating rooms and take the seat at the table, we need to give them capacity building in a holistic manner. So they have to understand the process and procedures, the negotiating items, but also the soft skills, because ultimately you can understand the whole processes here, but if you don't know how to, for example, make an intervention or a policy brief or use the opportunities of the huddles, it's very, very difficult for you to succeed. And that's why we set up the Youth Negotiators Academy at the beginning of last year with the aim for intergenerational leadership in decision-making processes. So really support young people not only coming to COP in general, but actually coming to COP and be part of the negotiation process, the decision-making process. And because it's a party-driven process, this needs to be done to the parties, which are the member states. So we basically went to the countries and asked them that if we are training and also financially supporting young people in your delegation, would you then give them a negotiating mandate? And last year we started off, we had 26 countries who signed on for this. We trained 60 negotiators from all around the world, from all the different UN regions. This year, as you mentioned, we have 125 of them here. We trained 175 from 54 member states, so basically every fourth country who is part of the UNFCCC already is part of the program, and we are aiming for more. So we have young people in all the different delegations, so we really have intergenerational leadership. To train the young people, it's a 6 months training process. It's a little bit similar than what you mentioned. It's quite intense, but also we believe that this is needed to actually set them up for success and not for failure, because sometimes, the capacity buildings are just like, okay, you have 2 days or you have some evening class and then you can come, and it's just not enough, because it's a huge burden, specifically on young people who are very, very passionate to come here, be part of these negotiations, be part of the delegations and actually negotiate on all the different items. So we actually we have young people in every single negotiating item here. Sometimes there are a lot, there are up to 10 people, for example, on the GGA, Global Goal Adaptation, we have like 10 people on Loss and Damage Fund, we had 9 people, but in others there are like at least 1, and this already shows how important it is to really train them well on the negotiating items, so they really understand what is going on, also that they know how to intervene, how to interact with delegations and so on. But maybe also to mention that it's not only about the capacity of knowing and understanding and also have the skills, but also the capacity, it's kind of the internal resilience you need to have, because it's a very, very high pressure space, specifically when You come from very small delegations. For example, the Tongan delegation of the negotiator who should have been here today, they have a very, very small delegation. To have their minister here means that also some of the negotiators are very busy. There's a lot of tasks which are suddenly dumped on you. So it's also about, how do you build your internal capacity and resilience, which we also do. We have also a trauma expert with us during the COP, was also doing a lot of self-care practices before to strengthen this side of the capacity building, which I think we should not underestimate, coming to COP and really having a safety network here as well, with a lot of support for the negotiators in case they're experiencing being overwhelmed, being burned out, or just having like a lot of stress and anxiety. Maybe the last element, which I think is also part of capacity building, what we also do is not only about what you know, but also who you know. And very often the success of the negotiators depends on who is responding in the right moment to you. And that's why we do very intentional community building amongst the young negotiators, so they actually get connected to basically 43 other member states, which basically connects them already to like 1/3 of all, or 1/4 of all the negotiation groups here, to all the other negotiating blocks we have in the process. And this sets them again up for success in the sense they can build much easier consensus. They actually work together on building draft policies across the different regions, so we can actually break out of this kind of how it's currently structured, that only the groups talk to each other. So that's, I think, like all part of a bigger sense of capacity building and a lot of different elements coming together. And I feel that this is very crucial to really look at it in a holistic way and not just like, okay, we explain them how the process, or just explain them the negotiating items, because I just don't believe that the intensity of the space, or it would do justice to the intensity of the space. And we have been seeing it's very, very successful, and looking very much forward, also working with everyone in the room together in the coming years. Maybe just to conclude, we also launched the Land Youth Negotiator Program, doing the same in the desertification negotiations. We're looking very much forward, also scaling what we have been doing into any other negotiating, multilateral negotiations, any other convention, because we do believe that intergenerational leadership is not only needed on climate, but also in any other negotiating area.
Thank you very much, Marie-Claire. I mean, it's incredibly impressive to have all those different aspects to it as well, and extremely important as well, we were mentioning is about the internal capacity and resilience. It's an incredibly intense space, this. You can see, looking around, we're now into the second week, and you can see on people's faces how exhausting a process, and to come to here and to have that support network, incredibly important. And I look forward to, you talk about community, I look forward to future collaborations between CYNP and Peaceboat as well. I think that there was a lot of potential there as well. Michaela, would you like to talk about some of the capacity building that you've been involved with as well?
Sure. So I guess CSET Youth, the Commonwealth Sustainable Energy Transition Youth Action Group, we were set up to address a big gap in the youth climate advocacy and action space, which is young professionals. I think there's a lot of talk about youth action more generally, but we don't really talk about the people who've been trained in certain professions, for example, engineers, planners, architects, and all these people, and how they can use the skills that they've been working on for so many years, to actually generate change, and quite physical, practical change as well. So one of the pillars, I guess, or objectives of how we achieve the change as CSET Youth is through capacity building, and also in using our role as a Commonwealth Youth Network to create spaces where these youth that we're empowering, youth and young professionals that we're empowering, can actually bridge the gap between their science and the policymakers at the Commonwealth level. So just an example, I guess, of actual capacity building initiative that we've been running. We've been working with Student Energy, which is another organization in the energy space, working with students to help them access the energy space. We've been working with them on a careers training project, so giving our mentorship as young professionals who've been working in the industry to help them to develop a toolkit for young entrepreneurs who want to enter the energy space, and give them kind of the tips and tricks, access to finance, how you would build teams, find advisors, and that kind of thing. Because a member of our executive committee, for example, is a solo entrepreneur in Malawi, and we believe that when one person breaks a barrier, that means that they should hold the door open for everyone behind them. And we really want to make sure that the young professionals who've got the opportunity with CSET Youth and at the Commonwealth level are creating spaces for other people as well. So yeah.
Thank you very much. And I think there's been a lot of recognition about, especially in recent years, about the importance of including youth in spaces. Whether or not that's gone far enough is a big discussion, a big question. I mentioned earlier that youth is a very broad topic, and often you may see that, okay, we've got our youth representative there, but who is speaking as a youth? What age are they, and where are they from? What's their background? What are their experiences? And one thing we wanted to look at here is inclusivity, and not only including a youth, but what kind of youth, different representative, of having a broader network of youth. And I said that we at Peaceboat were having a focus on including youth from large ocean states, because on the front line of the climate emergency, and their voices need to be heard. We specifically had a program focused on that. But what have been your perspectives so far on how inclusive has been the climate space, and what do you think needs to be done to increase inclusivity? Should we start? Who would like to start? Before I'm picking on people, Anusha, would you like to?
Yes. So throughout the 12 years of action of volunteering on ground and forming a lot of youth groups to come forward with climate actions, I would state we have numerous capacity buildings and inclusion examples, but I will state few of them. And one was in 2014 when I co-founded my NGO, the Sustainable Agricultural Organization, with my peers from the university. We organized capacity building, and we included youth with disability in that. What we did, we organized a planting day in a disability school with children from 5 years and until young adults to the age of 18. And we asked them to express what they would understand by food security and natural resource management into designs and pictures and drawings. And they were clearly able to communicate the effects of climate change on food security and on their own vulnerability, but also what action they can take. And they all told us that they are superheroes because they can bring their voice with us and act together in the space of climate change action. Another successful initiative is when we organized the Seeing Blue program, because we involved youth from 2 main islands in the Indian Ocean, Seychelles and Mauritius, and we were able to bring our voices together while we were conducting tours around the island and to see what was the state of the ocean and how us, youth from Seychelles and Mauritius, can contribute together, sharing the knowledge of each other. We might be in the same ocean, but our climate realities are also almost similar, but we come from different cultural backgrounds, and those traditional knowledge and new technologies that we youth have on both islands, we were sharing together. And also we have been organizing Conference of Youth for the past 4 successive years in Mauritius, and we also organized the Yali Climate Conference. We made sure that youth from each region of Mauritius were represented, because we did not want only elites in the group. We wanted youth from marginalized societies, youth from marginalized background, youth from coastal region, youth from the towns, youth from the town centers, youth with educational background, and also youth who do not have formal education but are able to do climate actions in their region. So that was a very powerful sign of inclusion. And one last inclusion initiative was we were working with youth on the coastal region into seaweed composting project. So what we made, these youth have informal education. So they taught us what fishing was about and also how they are protecting the ocean on the coastal region. And from the coast, we get a lot of seaweed that are spread on the sand. And they told us that they want to do something valuable with the seaweeds. And we included them in a project called the Seaweed Composting Project. So we educated them on the aspect of seaweed composting, and they taught us how to go to the sea and bring the seaweed and how to choose it. So that was a very good example of inclusion, because we took youth from informal educational backgrounds from a coastal region, which are highly vulnerable to the effect of climate change and sea level rise, and they taught us how they can bring value from the coast to the main island. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Giovanni, if you wanted to talk about inclusivity and diversity.
Yeah, definitely. When you speak about inclusivity, I think I'm going to look at it at two different ways: what I've seen work and what perhaps needs to be done as well. I think one practical example I always highlight is that, in fact, when we in St. Lucia, we revise our nationally determined contributions, our NDCs. In fact, we sort of commended for how did we strengthen the children and youth pillar within that. And within the revision process, what are the key things which, yes, we will engage as a formal youth organization, but the main aim was to ensure that we didn't just engage with the often engaged young people, which is oftentimes within the climate space, that you have a similar set of young people engaged. And essentially we were tasked to now sort of do that sort of stakeholder mapping to see who within the community we can engage in that would often not have been involved in the NDC. Many would not have been aware of what the NDC and how it would have impacted their lives. So it was a way of creating that snowball effect where, I mean, who's better to engage young people than young people, you know? So we were sort of given that role through the government to actually lead that process. I think it contributed very well because you get such diverse perspective. You know, I mean, I come from a very rural community, and the views there, perhaps from those in the urban, is quite different, and it's quite meaningful to the process. So I think that's a way where sort of, you know, governments lending their hand to young people to sort of do that mapping is quite key. But just into on the wider climate space, something which was sort of an eye-opener for me recently, and when we speak about including young people, we've definitely come a long way. I mean, look at how many young people now we have within the space, where there's negotiators and so on. But I think one of the key areas perhaps, and again, I don't know how it can be solved as yet, maybe I need to pull up ChatGPT to answer that. But particularly coming from a Caribbean, there is a lot of what we call overseas territories. In fact, just before COP, I was based in Bermuda for a bit, and you can see the amazing work which the young people are doing in these countries. But of course, and I'm going to take off my UN hat to respond to this. But you know, many of these countries, as overseas territories, they can't formally participate within the climate space. So it's oftentimes quite difficult for them. I think we have some overseas territories. Oh yeah, I know it's going to be from Cayman Islands, right? Yeah, perfect, yeah. And that is often, I'm sure you guys probably have similar challenges depending with countries like whereby they can't formally participate in the UN process, but there are amazing work being done by young people there. And how do we actually provide them that space within the COP? I mean, that is how we talk about full inclusivity, because the same island, same issues I would face in a small island, they're also a small island, and face even worse, you know. So it's key that, you know, just something which came up while I was there. It was really an eye-opener, and I think how do we sort of engage not only young people who are often not engaged, but young people who are from regions who are not within the formal or do not have that formal route into the UNFCCC space. I think that is sort of gives a more inclusive approach as well.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. It's actually something we had experience with as well at Peace Boat, is when we started the Climate and Ocean Youth Ambassador Programme, we originally wanted it to be countries, nation states that are part of our CIS. And then we realized that that doesn't include everybody because of the overseas territory. So we decided in your program that we would have a representative from Montserrat who would be part of the British delegation, but obviously extremely different experiences. But I think that's an extremely important point about continuing. Also, if I dare mention, continued colonialism is something that's not maybe discussed and should be discussed more when we're talking about parties and inclusion. It's something that we should definitely take further note of. Thank you, Giovanni. Marie-Claire, would you like to talk about your perspective?
Yeah, maybe 2 points. I think like it's important first when we talk about the inclusion of young people, like how are they included in the space in general? Because what I've seen also when I was focal point for the youth constituency Yango, that very often young people are also tokenized, you know, just kind of like put them up the first speaker on stage and then get them out of the room as soon as we talk about business, or kind of listen to their statements. I mean, the Yango is producing the Global Youth Statement every year, you know, and then we kind of bring it to the parties and they, you know, maybe like even take like 20 minutes, half an hour to present it, then take a picture. but in the negotiation you would never see that they're actually defending the interest of what actually was written there, and it's the work of thousands of young people. And it's really, really frustrating when you see how young people are tokenized. And that's why I think it's, first of all, important to talk about the inclusion of young people in the process. And it's very important that we have young people here who come independently from the government, who are there for civil society, here as activists, and defend the interests of children and young people from the ground, as you also have been mentioning already. But then I think it's also very important, because this is the reason why we're meeting here, is the COP, which is a multilateral climate process, that it's very important that we have young people included in the negotiation delegations as well, and that there are bridges between the civil society spaces outside the process and then the inside the process. And that's exactly what we have been doing over the last 2 years, what we're intending to do for the future. And then the other part is the inclusion of who is actually going to be part of the academy, who is actually part of the negotiating rooms. And for us, it's very clear that we not want to be kind of a high-flying elite group of young people who anyway have the opportunities already and then just come here for another conference. That's why we have worked out the selection criteria for the countries, because ultimately the countries are selecting the young people together with us, and they have to finally nominate the young people. But there is a quite detailed list of what they have to take into consideration. For example, there needs to be a gender balance. We're not accepting an all-male kind of cohort from a country. Also gender fluid and gender diverse people. If they're indigenous people in a country, they have to report to us. If they're not sending anyone who is indigenous, they have to report to us how they have been reaching out to indigenous people, and have to basically tell us why they couldn't find an indigenous person on the delegation. But actually I was very pleased that last year we had 17 out of the 50 negotiators were indigenous. This year I would need to check the number again, because it's quite high, which is really, really remarkable, as indigenous people are heavily underrepresented. Also, obviously, from the diversity of the countries and the regions, this is very important to us. Also, religious minorities. So we have like a whole set of different criteria. I think like there is 2 barriers. One of them is the language barrier. If you're not fluent in English, unfortunately, you are not really going to succeed in the negotiations, because only the opening and the closing plenaries are translated. But I mean, all the contact groups, all the huddles, I mean, obviously it's not translated. So if you're not fluent in English, it's going to be really, really hard for you to succeed in the negotiations. And this is a barrier. On the procedural side here, we cannot solve, but what we're thinking of next year, providing all the negotiators free language courses, for example, with the British Council together, so they can actually strengthen their English skills. But again, it's not the most inclusive way, because you basically still adapt them to the system instead of making the system actually more inclusive. But I think this is something we can collectively address and actually push for, that these spaces get more accessible for language diversity. And I think the other one, which actually this year is remarkably good, is the accessibility for young people or people with disabilities in general and special abilities. This year, the UNFCCC mentioned it was the most inclusive COP. They have been thinking about a lot of different things to actually guide people. Here there is, for example, if you have like hearing related issues, they have like integrated things in the floor. I don't know, but it's not my area of expertise, which has never happened before. And actually I think this is a great step towards more inclusion. On this level, we have seen that we had young people with special abilities and disabilities in our cohort, but we really want to strengthen this, so we also launched a new program to specifically offer countries an additional young person if they bring someone with special abilities and disabilities, because we do believe it's very, very important that these young people, again, get a seat at the table, and we are kind of not only going with the abled people, but actually also taking all the other special abilities into consideration. So for us, this is one of the centerpieces, and we're trying our very, very best. But again, like, we are also really want to work with everyone together to ensure that that ultimately the negotiations actually getting more diverse, more inclusive. Because if we want to make this process change, we also have to ensure that the people who actually are working in the process bring the diversity we want to see directly on the table.
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. Incredibly, just we're talking about diversity. There's different points that I hadn't even considered that you were raising up, and it's fantastic to think about. You know, when we're talking about diversity and what that range includes. Michaela, do you want to talk about inclusivity
Sure.
And diversity from your point of view?
I mean, I think everyone's raised really good points, which I would completely echo. I think maybe the one thing that I want to touch on is what Fatima was saying about giving us a seat at the table. So as CSET Youth, we were extremely fortunate to be supported by the Commonwealth Secretariat, and we were given a seat at the table at the Sustainable Energy Forum, which was attended by ministries across the Commonwealth. So most of the 56 Commonwealth countries had sent ministry representation to discuss the energy transition. So myself and my co-lead were also at that table. But the thing is, is I think there's one step further than just getting a seat at the table, because sometimes a youth sits at a table and the table is clearly not designed for them. So what you do is you sit at the table and you listen, or you speak, and as you guys have been saying, like someone hears what you say and then it goes in one side and out the other. So I think one thing that we're really trying to do as CSET Youth is, at least within the Commonwealth space, to create meaningful opportunities for participation for youth. So that's like externally how we're trying to do it, by just trying to engage in like more diverse avenues. So not just through the common like routes that the Commonwealth normally takes, for example, like through ministries and governments, but also trying to reach out to grassroots networks across regions, because I know there's a lot of networks already existing. For example, like the one that you're involved in the Caribbean, where youth are already like self-mobilizing and creating that change and reaching out to these people to see the great work that you're all doing. And yeah, so inclusivity and inclusive representation is also one of the pillars of CSET Youth. So I think this panel is doing great at highlighting that for us. So obviously with the diversity of the 56 Commonwealth countries as well, we're a relatively new group, but we're committed to trying to get representation within our membership from all member states. So, I mean, I'll talk a bit more about it at the end when I ask you all to join CSET Youth, but we also have a very open membership, so anyone up to the age of 35 can be a member, whatever your background, as long as you are really passionate about energy. And I think that's the great thing about so many youth groups, is that we just want your passion to help us to drive change. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We mentioned as well sort of about the tokenism of youth, and you often have a youth speaker at the beginning or a youth speaker at the end, and that's great. And it can also go the other way as well, and have youth-only events, and that's the kind of putting the youth perspective into a box and not having as much dialogue, intergenerational dialogue. And that's another thing that we wanted to cover in this side event, was the intergenerational aspect of it. And something that I've noticed is a lot of people saying the future is in the hands of the youth. You have the answers. And myself, I'm 45, and I think that's passing the buck. I think that handing it over to the youth to clean up the mess that's been made by older generations is, quite frankly, not good enough. So I think intergenerational leadership is incredibly important, and I'd like to get your perspectives on that as well, and is something that you've experienced, or how can we kind of increase that more? Michaela, would you like to start?
Okay. I mean, I think when you're looking at how quickly the world is changing nowadays, that even when I see like the representatives from Global Kids, I'm starting to feel really old. So I think there's something to be said about like very inclusive definition of intergenerational, and actually having representation from people from different backgrounds as well as age groups. And so one of the ways that we've tried to do this, for example, is through our Children and Youth Challenge, which we launched earlier this year, which was for children aged 7 to 17. Because while we are a network for mostly youth and young professionals, we also recognize there's a lot of untapped creativity and like new ideas that come when you're at the age when you haven't yet been told like how the world works and what the rules are. And trying to get children from across all the Commonwealth countries to think about energy in their local communities and how you can drive that change. And then us using our platform and our partnerships to give you the opportunity to actually do that. Because we want to make sure that we're not just giving you a space to say something where we also listen to you and then forget what you said, but to actually create a place and a platform where you can also continue to share your ideas across a wider geographic space, and also across wider like diversity of people as well. Thank you.
Maybe from our side, obviously the negotiations have to be led in an intergenerational way. I mean, it's not we are not one to kind of, with empowering young people and train young people and equip young people, kick the older negotiators out. We have to do it together. 50% of the world's population is young, so that's what we aim for, have an equal representation of children and young people in these decision-making rooms. But this obviously goes without saying that the others are very important. We do believe, or I do believe very, very strongly, that every generation has something absolutely crucial and important to bring to these tables. It's essential that we are working together, and I think what is really important here is that also when we talk about capacity building, that we learn how to actually work better together, because there's a lot of judgments within us, like, as you mentioned, the older generation didn't take care, and the other ones like, oh yeah, anyway, you don't understand the process. And I mean, it's already there, right? If you have young females, sometimes, in the negotiating rooms, like, the older negotiators won't listen to them because they're like, okay, I mean, what does a potential young female know about it? And I had it before when I was a negotiator, right, that some people just didn't listen to me because they didn't know my face and I was young and a female in the room. So I think there's also an element to capacity building there. I think it's very important that we are strengthening this intergenerational collaboration, that we are working before the COP is basically on the way, on the road to COP, that we work very effectively together so we can ensure that actually we build the trust amongst the generations again, especially in these processes, which can be very, very divided, to ensure that when we are actually here, that it works very well. And it's not enough if we just have here an intergenerational dialogue and the whole year we don't work together, because the trust is not being built here. It's too late if you're trying to rebuild or to build the trust. So that's why we also work throughout the year, 6 months capacity building program. We have like so-called In Conversation With, which at the heart is having intimate conversations with elders, with seniors, with other generations, but also with children. We had a session with Save the Children, where we listened to young people and kind of heard their kind of motivations, dreams, and what they want us to see as kind of a bridge between. We also had a session to think of how can future generations be brought better into decision-making process. So how can we, when we are negotiating, bring the ideas of the desires of future generations into today's decision-making. So we're really trying to make this as holistic as possible, with kind of working with all the generations which are here today, as well as the future generations which are to come and will inherit and will also hopefully benefit from what we are doing in today's negotiations.
Thank you very much. Anusha?
Yes, the climate space is multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholders engaged at different levels. So one main things that I want to highlight, if youth as volunteers, we are able to organize so many events and mobilize youth, mobilize people to join us in our cause, driving actions, driving grassroots activism, going for advocacy. Imagine if we are given the seat at the table of climate change negotiation, at the seat of climate change decision-making, how impactful we would be. And I think one important aspect that you mentioned about intergenerational equity is that really leaders, one aspect of leadership is to be able to give space to the new to come in and tell you what innovative ideas, how can you make the status quo change, how to challenge business as usual, and how to do it in an effective, efficient manner, and how to be inclusive of the youth is fundamental for the development of our countries. And even in the sustainability space, we need youth to tell us how they want their future to look like. This is our right. It is our future which is being discussed, which is being decided. So intergenerational equity and giving that leadership capacity to youth is very much important. We see too much of youth tokenism, like you mentioned, of youth washing. This is not the way we are going forward. You can't just do an event, call some youth, and then, after that, there's no follow-up, there's no inclusion, there's no consultation process. I believe a consultation process on each thematic areas of the climate change need to include youth. But also, for example, in my country, in our NDCs, youth are not included. Youth do not write NDCs. But because of my professional background as the first scientist in natural resource management and climate change in my country, I was able to write in the NDC for the Afro-youth sector. So like me, there are so many other youth who can do it, who has the capacity to do it, who has the right thinking to do it. But we need to give them the space at the level of ministry, at the level of our party stakeholders approach. And also, when it comes to inclusion, we should not forget having consultation with the marginalized group, because their realities and our realities are not the same, and we need to hear from them what are their needs and how can we all work together to meet their needs, and also how to include them into capacity building, into climate action, into negotiations, and into decision making. So, and gender is a very important part of it as well. We need more women representation, and we cannot take gender just like cross-cutting. We need to take gender as an important pillar to achieve equity in the climate change space. We cannot just say we will train like 100 women and that is equity. No, we need to say how many women we want to put at the seat of climate change negotiation, how many women we want to put in our parliament as ministers, how many women we want to give the chance to be decision makers. And here at the COP, the Ministry of Environment of the UAE, the Honorable Shama Al-Mazri, is a very young woman minister. She's just 29, she's a minister, and she's a woman, and she's young. I think women and youth should be placed really in the forefront of climate change negotiations and decision making, and this is how we will really be equitable and inclusive and diverse into our approach to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've had some really great perspectives there.
Maybe just to add, when you speak about that intergenerational aspect, I always remember something my grandmother used to tell me, that when she speaks to me, you listen and you keep quiet. That was sort of the narrative going on. Of course, that no longer applies now, and as young people, that no longer applies, whereby we are in a position where we can actually respond meaningfully. And I think that was what she sort of wanted to instill in me, not just because you were young, but the fact that you need to sort of be grounded in knowing what you're speaking, and that links to the whole point of capacity building, in being able to meaningfully contribute, to meaningfully influence, and that is when, persons would listen to you and so on. But I think it's key, I always say that we need to know where we're coming from to know where we're going. It's important to understand the past, and not only and also the current, and to know how we will shape the future. And to do that, that is where the intergenerational aspect comes into play. I will speak about that collaborative effort. It cannot just be young people alone. We need to know that sort of, the historical context. When I came into the climate space, when the Paris Agreement was being negotiated, I was probably still very, not a toddler, but, so you had to sort of get that sort of historical knowledge, and that is why I say it's key that we know the past, merging with the future, and that should form sort of the cornerstone for us to really and truly create a better future for not only this generation, but for future generations. So the past, the current, the future, it's like I would say the recipe for a more sustainable world.
Thank you. Inclusivity across the generations as well. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our panel. We said that we'd also like to invite the representatives of the different organizations to just sort of give a call to explain a little bit about their organizations. We'd like to have a time for Q&A, but because we had two panels, and also because we were going to have some representatives, maybe we can leave the Q&A till the end, have a call out from organizations, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. We still have 25 minutes left of the event. So first of all, if you'd like to give a round of applause to everybody that was in our panel today. Thank you very much. And I'd like to welcome, I'll just take over to the podium, and Tim, would you like to come and maybe sit as a space next to Javanik there, if you want to come up in there, and Joshua, could you want to sit here, and I'll go to the podium. Would you prefer to go talk about who's going? Go here. Or here, I can go. You want to stand for a second? Yeah, it's okay. So we said before that there was 5 different organizations that were involved in this organizing this event. Michaela, do you want to give a shout out first from CSET Youth?
Do you have the slide?
Yeah. Sorry, wrong computer.
Cool. So yeah, as I mentioned, CSET Youth is a youth network within the Commonwealth, and we're looking to engage youth and young professionals in accelerating the SDG 7 on access to sustainable energy. I've just put our contact details up on the screen. I would love to connect with all of you who are from across the Commonwealth to see how we can engage more youth in your local communities, because we think that the energy transition is a global challenge. We all need to be part of it together, but there's so much diversity in the different approaches that we need to take, and we want to ensure that we have that inclusive approach when we say things to the Commonwealth Secretariat, and to make sure that we're representing every single one of the 56 Commonwealth countries. So yeah, to keep it short.
Thank you. Tim, do you want to say a few words as well? Thank you for welcoming us. Tim Damon from GYDI.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So Global Youth Development Institute is very dedicated to the Action for Climate Empowerment agenda, if you're familiar, from Article 12 of Paris and Article 6 of the Convention. So the two pillars of our work are very much the meaningful engagement of young people into the UNFCCC process, whether as observers or as part of their party delegations, and then also really empowering them to implement the Action for Climate Empowerment projects in their country level, and supporting a lot of what the Young Go constituency is doing through their ACE group and activities. So very happy to connect more with partners in terms of how to train or support any kind of youth empowerment, whether it's in this space or back at home.
Marie-Claire, do you want to say anything about CYMP? I know that you would, because you
I
stood in for Elizabeth,
Yeah.
maybe, but if there's anything else you'd like to say.
Yeah, maybe more on a procedural point if some of you are interested. So because we train negotiators, and I mentioned before, it's a country-driven process, means that the countries ultimately need to agree that they have young people in delegation. So if you are a young person, or if you're any person who wants to kind of engage in the program, we would need to talk to your delegation, preferably the head of delegation, and we have a conversation, we explain the program to them, and then if they agree, they will sign an MOU with us. This is to ensure that the young person who is getting trained by us and getting also the community and also potential funding, that they're actually going to be negotiating. Because we don't want to train them, over 6 months, and then at the end the country is like, oh, well, actually we need someone at the side event who is doing Instagram. No, that's not how it works. That's why we signed an MOU with them. So if you're interested, you can also come talk to me afterwards, and then I'm kind of happy to have a conversation. You can pick it up with your country. Maybe your country is already part of it. As mentioned, there are 54 countries who are part of it. We already have a lineup of countries who will join us next year as well, so very happy to take this forward. And then once the MOU is signed, then there's the nomination process we talked about when we talked about inclusion before. So they go through this process of nominating people, and then they get nominated to us in June. And then from June onwards until the COP, they're getting, or basically the young people are getting trained for the upcoming COP. So now we know that we go to Azerbaijan, to Baku. So that's basically then the next touch point. And also just to mention that this is basically the first year. The whole thing can be up to a 3 years program. So you basically join the advanced training, and then there's an alumni network. But yeah, just for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm just mentioning how the start of the journey works, and then the rest is coming afterwards.
Thank you very much. And as I said, I work for an organisation called Peaceboat, and I'd like to. I was founded more than 40 years ago this year, and our founder is here, Yoshio Kotatsuya. We don't have enough. Are you okay to take the podium? Yeah. So we can have
And thank you very much about that. It is a really, really great session, and so inspiring. Yeah, and thank you really so much. Please, again. And yes, I think that is how young people can participate and for the decision making is really important. I really believe so. And now the current introduced that this organization Peaceboat is 40 years. We are continuing this chartership and going around the world, and a lot of young people also we are inviting on board and for capacity building and so on. But when I started this one is 40 years ago. So I was 23 years old. That's why I'm now 45 years old. Yeah, a little bit different, maybe. Yeah. So anyway. This time, it was very important when I was 23 years old. That time is I have the passion, now still I have a passion, but that young people's the energy is really still, I remember like that yesterday, the things. So, and at that time is I really believe whatever we can do, we can change. And this world or this society or this politics and so on. That is a kind of the dream is always in our heart and to achieve something. And some people is asking me is how that from zero we establish such kind of a big project. It is a huge ship, 2,000 people joining this the program every time. So and of course that's an incredible scale of that. However, that is I started from the zero. And because I really remember there is a passion and energy, at that time I have that. And fortunately, I have a many good friend through this activity, and that networking is give me the more energy. I think that is a direct human relationship is a very important. So that's why we are continue to inviting the young people on board and the ongoing program we are doing. Because we learned that during the COVID time, of course, the offline communication is powerful, but on the other hand, we really need direct communication, I think. Meet each other and have a lunch, have a chat, and pray together, and watching TV or together directly is always give us something, energy, and how to say, potential to start something more. And I think always I feel COP conference should not be here. They have to go outside of this venue. And let's go to the island. And let's go to the really people suffering by this climate change, flood, and so many people are now suffering. But the COP conference is always inside of here. I think that's why one of my dreams is with full of the young people, and to invite a leader of this COP conference and organize a floating COP conference. And visiting that not small island state, that a large ocean states, for example. I think there is thousands of the potential to make an innovative idea to stimulate this so-called authoritative leaders, and at the same time, that is to encourage the young people. And together, cross the generation and so on, we can start to really save this planet together. So I hope that we can work to continue to more and more. And the intergeneration, I'm still 45 years old, so I will do my best. And this one is the next project, and the Peaceboat Eco Ship. And I really would like to build this ship. And why is that we need a kind of the very strong impact to the world. We have to do something. And we are doing the peace boat and the cruising we are doing. So that's why that we would like to stimulate the maritime industry. Hey, we can create such kind of full of the solar panel and the wind powers ship we can create. And let's try to materialize about our dream. That is the message of our Eco Ship. Thank you very much, and let's work together.
Thank you very much. And Peaceboat will be organising as well, continue to organise programmes. We have a scholarship programme, which you can join the ship. It's for the Youth for SDGs. So if you are looking to join the programme, we have some information that we can hand out to you. So the deadline for registration is the 15th of December. And you can come on board the ship and learn more about the SDG, specifically SDG 13 and 14. We have just 15 minutes left, and if I'd like to open up the floor to questions. If you'd like to ask any of the questions here. Yep. Emily is... Oh, sorry. Yep. Yeah.
Yes, hello. Jeremy from the Klingendahl Institute. We are a diplomatic academy. We train diplomats from around the world. If you allow 2 questions, one would be on your experiences regarding the training modalities. Marie-Claire, you already mentioned that it's not enough to train somebody for 2 days, but you need more time. Maybe some more experiences on what kind of trainings work and how you design those trainings. And the other question will be, when you talked about youth tokenism, I think it's always about how does the space allow it, but I would be also curious to hear what was your experience, how you as youth delegates or your youth that you included, how did they relate, what was their experience within their delegation, within their national delegation?
I think was that question aimed at Marie-Claire.
I mean, I can kick it off and then we can take it forward. So we do an in-depth learner needs assessment amongst the young negotiators who are coming in, also with the countries. We have in-depth understanding of what the country needs them to know. So this is basically the prerequisite to then put the training together. There are 6 modules over 6 months, and every module is kind of covering another element. First is more on the knowledge, the second part is more on the skills, and the knowledge is really very quickly. I can show you the outline afterwards, we can go over the modalities and everything together. But the first one is really understanding the structure, so kind of that you have the skeleton, then you put kind of the items on the skeleton, this is the negotiating items. Then, I mean, this is kind of the more knowledge part, then we go into the skills part of the art of negotiating, and basically kind of giving them the understanding of what their role is going to be here. And then the last one is the leadership kind of. Once you understand what your role is and how you're negotiating, there's kind of the leadership element as well as the resilience we talked about before. And then the module 6 is the last one where everything comes together. So all the 6 kind of or the 5 streams are coming together into the last in-person one, which is a 3 days negotiation simulation, as well as kind of a conscious closing of the training space and a conscious opening then into the COP itself, where we put them all together in the different negotiating items, so they actually know before they're heading into the negotiations who is negotiating on loss and damage, who is negotiating on gender, on action for climate empowerment, on finance, adaptation, and so on. And this is kind of the last element. So we have a mix between self-paced learning courses as well as online interactions, live online interactions. Then there is the online as well as the in-person element, and all of this is based on learning objectives which have been assessed prior with the negotiators as well as the countries.
Thank you very much. Before we go to the next question, my apologies, could I invite Tani and Fatima up to join on the stage so that you can take questions as well? I'll just step out to the podium here.
I can also stand so they can take.
We tried to make the panel as large as possible to hear as many perspectives, but we needed a few extra seats up at the front, and a few more seats at the table. So do we have any more questions for anybody who's with us here? I saw some more hands raised up. Yep, gentleman in the back.
Kia ora. Thanks for all your work. It's a really important space you guys work in. My question is around, in professional senses, how can people partner with youth? So everyone will have youth and young professionals in their workplaces or in their communities. How can they help mentor and drive that as something they can do themselves as we expand this out and try to get as many people developing youth as possible?
Is that aimed at anyone in particular, or would you like to open it up?
No, just whoever.
No, would anyone who would like to answer that question? Any takers?
I can
Michaela?
start with it, and hopefully other people will. I think sometimes when you talk about partnering with youth, then probably don't want to offend anyone, but in my experience, a lot of the time people go straight to younger as the official youth constituency. But there's so many big youth groups out there, or small youth groups, that are doing really great things. And firstly, finding a relevant youth group, and because not all youth are the same, youth are not homogenous. So actually, I think asking non-youth to actually take the time to think, why are they engaging youth and how are they going to do it meaningfully rather than just for the sake of it. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing as well is I don't think always you need to partner with an external youth organization. I think it's better for people to put in place actual structures within their own organizations to bring youth into their processes, rather than expecting that youth are external consultants, because that's more participatory and long-lasting and sustainable.
To build off her idea of like speaking to youth, like in youth groups and stuff, I would say once you do that, introduce the idea of participating, because once you do that, like until this summer, I didn't realize you could just go to city council and tell them like what you want to happen. So I think just introducing the ideas, telling them that they can do these things, I feel like that you don't even have to like do that much work. They'll probably take it off by themselves. So I feel like just introducing the idea can open a lot of doors for youth to want to help you and want to work with you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Should we open any more questions? Yeah, the gentleman at the front.
It's not a question, but I'm just sharing. It's a vibrant and very interesting, panel discussion and panel speakers, and it attracted me to join this session particularly because I realized over the years many good fellowships opportunities are there. UNFCCC is giving, many other international organizations are giving space to youth. Thing is, if we are utilizing this position, utilizing this opportunity, and getting our leadership built, and negotiation is just like ma'am has said. You need skills to negotiate. So over the years, negotiators are there and more will be likely to join. But conviction is very important. Nobody will give a space. Many things are pre-planned, prefabricated, decisions are already taken. But they need consensus, like you are involved, youth are involved, children are involved, we see. But we need conviction, we need more networking, and we need trust. The ma'am has said, we need trust to unite together. And rightly said, like unite, act, and deliver. But then only building trust among young people, that's very important, be it is school, college, university. Like, many of our professionals, after like you said, you're 45 now. I realize I'm also 45 now. So over the years, we have crossed the ages and trying to deliver, but matters is coming together and building trust. Then only we can, negotiate on a table or a platform, rightly for young, like the session's topic is international leadership. And I remember a call, youth are not the problems to be solved. Youth are solutions. They are not the liabilities, they are the assets. So we need to consider ourselves as the assets in our national government or in our arena, wherever we are, and we have to act. This is all my.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your comments. Does anybody like to respond before we take another question? Okay, thank you very much. Has anybody got any other questions? We just have 5 minutes left.
Hi everyone, I'm Eileen from Singapore. So I do agree, as in, just a quick opinion I think is, when we talk about capacity building, we always think about, it's almost like we have a narrative that young people are not enough and therefore requires capacity building. On this topic, I do feel that it's the more experienced and older generation that may need a bit more capacity building. They may not like the word. In terms of how do you really know how to mainstream and include young people. But my question really is for the panel. As young people, what do you think is the role of young people in yourself? And if you have any best case studies or examples of the effectiveness of what is the role of young people to ensure, or what can we do as young people to ensure that intergenerational leadership and youth empowerment in this space?
Anusha, do you want to?
Thank you for your question. So I'd like to say that capacity building indeed is important, and maybe yes, we are the most, the generation with receiving the most capacity building sessions. But I also believe that capacity building is one thing, and the next step is the important thing as well. So we might be here and receiving a lot of knowledge and building new skills, setting new tones for the future, but it is what we get in the capacity building and what action we can take out of there and make impact in our society. I would like to give an example of one particular capacity building sessions that I have attended as a pre-COP21 event I mentioned earlier at the 9th UNESCO Youth Forum. So it was before the Paris Agreement was signed, and it was to make youth aware of climate change and what are our vulnerabilities, but also how youth can be assets, like Sir, you correctly mentioned. When I was there, I was self-funded. I went and I just wanted to learn more about climate change. And I was so impressed and so inspired by all the knowledge around climate change, and realized that in my island it is still so less talked about, and there's so much work to do. What I did after this 1 week of capacity building sessions, just as I reached Mauritius, I went to my university professors and I talked to them about climate change and its impact for vulnerable communities such as the small island developing state, but also large ocean states, because Mauritius is a 2.3 million square kilometers EEZ, even bigger than European continent itself. So there's a lot of work which we need to do. What happened, I was on weekly discussions with my lecturers from the University of Mauritius, and one action concretely which came out from this capacity building. So this 9th UNESCO Youth Forum inspired me to take action in the climate space. I went to speak to my professors in the University of Mauritius, and together we decided that there is a very important need that the university launch a master's degree in climate change and sustainable development. And the course was mounted for 2 years, and it was launched in 2017. And I was in the first batch graduating from this master's, and very happily to say that the first master degree holder in climate change and sustainable development from the University of Mauritius. So I think this is how capacity building can just instill in you that spark that you carry forward and carry your impact with you for your country and your community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of our session. We'd like to thank the panelists, and also we have Jeanette who's here. Thank you very much, Jeanette, for joining the first panel as well. And thank you to all of the organizations that worked together to put this event together. If you'd like to reach out to any of the organizations, as I said, we have representatives here, and we'd like to continue this discussion further. So we'd like to close now. We'll take a photograph of everybody together, and we do have an event after this, so I do have a favor to ask, is when you're continuing your discussions, if we could perhaps do that outside, so that we give a space to the next presenters to come in and use this space here. So a final round of applause to everybody, to yourselves and the panelists. Thank you. So panelists, if you'd like to, Jeanette as well, if you'd like to come up, everybody who's involved, and we'll have a photograph together. And please do stay around for to talk to us, but we're going to do that outside.
According to the negotiation outcomes.